Welcome. I am Jay Weatherburn. I am here to welcome everybody to our last monthly meetup for 2020 for the Australasia Preserves Community of Practice. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I am today, the land of the Wurundjeri, and pay respect to their elders past and present. And I extend that respect to traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. What I'm going to do real quick is share my screen for a bit of housekeeping. First up, we do have a code of conduct for this community. Please, we do encourage everyone to be familiar with this code of conduct. Basically, we ask everybody to bring a spirit of respect and friendly inquiry to all of our interactions with the Australasia Preserves Forum and Community of Practice. I should note for everybody just joining us and for everyone here, we are recording this session. It will be published on the Australasia Preserves YouTube channel. Please keep your videos off if you can while our speakers are going. Mute yourself when not talking, and we'll throw them on again for the question discussion time. Please, if you can, give yourself an identifiable name on Zoom. You can do that by selecting yourself in the participants list of this Zoom window. If you can't work it out, yell out in the chat box and someone will be able to help you. Chat function. Also use the chat box to introduce yourself. Please say hello, introduce yourself, yell out if there's any tech issues as we go, and we'll be able to attend to those. I think that's it for housekeeping. I'm going to jump right in here and give you a look at our agenda for today. We are today showcasing the various education and training materials developed by two working groups of really dedicated and energetic people, energetic volunteers from the Australasia Preserves community. So first up today, we'll have Ross Harvey talking about the outputs and the work of the Education Development Working Group. We will have Matthew Burgess sharing a brief history and overview of digital preservation essentials. We have Michelle Goodman here today. I'm so excited to welcome Michelle. She's going to be sharing her participant experience with that first online training delivery that Matthew did using the digital preservation essentials materials. And then back to Matt for a review of how that, excuse me, a review of how the online training went, detailing the digital preservation essentials materials and next steps for the community to use. We'll have a bit of time for questions and discussion, and then we wrap it all up. So firstly, we are showcasing the work of this Education Development Working Group. I would like to give Ross Harvey the floor now to give us a bit of an overview of the work done by this working group and how to take a look at and to use the outputs of this work. So over to you, Ross.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm out of practice with talking and my voice may well give up, but I hope not. I'll speak briefly about the work of the Education Development Working Group, or technically it's a subgroup of the larger working group. What happened? Oh, yes. I need to tell you what's going to be coming up in the next part of this meeting, because this subgroup was set up to follow on from some things that we realized when the digital carpentry workshops were starting to be developed. And it was felt that there would be a need for some educators' input, some input about what courses should look like. I must admit that I find the members of the group staring at me from the screen a little bit off-putting, but hey, there you go. So you can see that this group consists of 8 people, or consisted, I should say, of 8 people. And of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 were at the time educators, so the others were practitioners. Excuse me, sorry about that. And it was felt that this mix of educators would give a kind of more solid basis, perhaps, to what was being developed. I posted a URL in the chat box, and it is to the AusPreserves website, to the tab that says working group. So what I'm about to say, you can explore further. And in particular, you can explore the 3 outputs. I really am out of practice with talking, having sat by myself mainly for a year. There we are. Okay, so if you want to check out that URL, you'll find a lot more about what I'm going to say. So the key aim for this education development subgroup was to ascertain appropriate frameworks for Australasian focused digital preservation and education. It was felt that there was some particular local aspects that we needed to take account of. And so last year, this group developed 3 outputs. They're all shared, and this is important, they're all shared under a CC BY-NC SA license, so that we wanted from the start to make them totally available to people. So the first of these outputs was called Guidelines for Developing and Offering Digital Preservation Training and Education. This indicates what we felt needs to be present in material developed under the auspices of Australasia Preserves. So the guidelines cover the primary audience for the material, the need to consider culturally specific practices relating to Indigenous cultural materials, and then a lot of minimal requirements, some of them being openness, equitable access, clear learning outcomes, speaker notes, recording of the presentation, that kind of thing, what we felt needed to be present there. And finally, where the material would be hosted, so it was available to other people. The second of the outputs is titled Developing Online Education and Training Material. So one of the guidelines is particularly important for online material. It says, students must have equitable access, available in multiple modes of delivery, face-to-face and distance, synchronous and asynchronous, so that the location of the student does not preclude participation. Now, if you've tried ever to put together a course, you will know how difficult it is to ensure all of that, but we felt it was important to state this principle and offer some minimum requirements for online offerings to ensure equitable access. So this guideline provides 6 minimum requirements that all online material must meet, and then it gives some examples of other material. The third output came along a little bit later. It became apparent as course material was being developed by other groups. And it's a workshop evaluation form. Basically, it's a long list of questions you might want to use to evaluate a workshop. Questions can be selected as appropriate for each workshop. There's no need to use all of the questions, but some of them are highly desirable, the others are optional. And we also point to where you can find more guidance on that. So most of the work on these guidelines or outputs happened last year, 2019. And looking back at them recently, I noticed that there is a revision date of September 2020 on them, but this has not happened given the peculiar circumstances of this pandemic year. In fact, the group hasn't met for a considerable time. The impact of these outputs is hard to figure out. I know of one online course developed late last year that uses them, and another course which uses or used the evaluation form. Perhaps the guidelines have been accessed from the AusPreserve's website and consulted by course developers. I hope so, but I have no evidence of this. I fondly hope that they have made some impact given the work that went into putting them together. I want to make a final point. This working group discussed many possibilities for further courses that could be developed and could be useful to this group. None of them so far have happened, to the best of my knowledge. It would be a pity if the good work this group developed was not used in the future. So here's an invitation. Anyone? Hands up? That's it. Thank you.
I think that sets the theme nicely for today. The idea here is an invitation to use the work and to share it widely. So thank you very much, Ross, for sharing that work. We are going to jump straight onto the Digital Preservation Essentials Working Group, which was the second of those two working groups that we started. It's just over 2 years ago now. And this Digital Preservation Essentials is basically a series of modules that we first developed in a face-to-face delivery mode. Then, as with so many things in this year of global pandemic, was further developed to provide online training delivery. So I'm going to throw straight over to Matthew Burgess to give us a brief history and an overview of Digital Preservation Essentials.
Thanks, Jay. Just going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see the slides there. So as Jay was saying, Digital Preservation Essentials was developed by a working group as part of Australasia Preserves, and the first iteration of the training was delivered as Digital Preservation Carpentry at the 14th International Digital Curation Conference in Melbourne in February 2019. So after that, the working group was formed and the material was developed into a series of 5 modules focusing on pre-ingest and ingest activities. So the training material was finalised earlier this year, and an expression of interest was opened for New South Wales public libraries to participate in a face-to-face trial in March this year. Unfortunately, the planned workshop was scheduled for the week that Sydney went into lockdown and it was postponed. So subsequently, the working group reconvened and the first 2 modules were reviewed for online delivery, and a shortened online trial was then scheduled for New South Wales public libraries in October this year. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the training material itself, and I'll talk about a review of the trial after that. So we developed 5 modules, as well as an introductory module, with the expected outcomes to learn about key digital preservation concepts in regard to various aspects of receiving, handling, and managing digital content, learn how to prepare digital materials for preservation, learn how to approach workflow development for digital preservation, learn about current tools for working with digital materials, and to contribute to and support a growing digital preservation community of practice seeking to gain more practical skills and to educate others. So I'm just going to quickly go through the overview for each of the 5 modules. So the first one is digital preservation concepts and workflows, which provides an overview of such, including the Open Archival Information System reference model, and talking about some of the terminology in there with SIPs, APEs, and DIPs. Talks about basic digital preservation workflows, discussions on what if you don't have a digital repository, goes through pre-ingest and ingest actions, as well as storage and access. And it has 2 group activities of building a workflow and then matching tools to that workflow. The next module is packaging digital materials for ingest or transfer, which looks at ingest actions, discusses the Bagot file packaging format, looks at tools that use the format, and the activity includes working with Bagger. We also have quick start to the command line, which discusses what the command line is, why you should learn it, and different terminals. And it looks at paths and has a few basic activities to introduce people to that. We also have file format characterization, which looks at what a file format actually is, what we need to know about files, how to interrogate our files, and using a file format ID tool and file format validation as well. We then have metadata and digital preservation, which looks at what metadata is and why it's important. It looks at standards, and in particular preservation metadata standards such as premise, looks at how metadata is stored, again looks at tools such as EXIF tool, which is what the activity is based around. So the recommended pathway is based on the knowledge requirements for each module, and the material was initially developed for face-to-face delivery with a suggested agenda of 2 consecutive days. So the online trial focused on the first 2 modules, digital preservation concepts and workflows, and file format characterization. And this was run over 2 morning sessions on a Monday and a Wednesday, so it had a day in between. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen, and I'll hand over to Michelle Goodman from City of Parramatta to share her experience as a participant in the trial before I discuss overall participant feedback and next steps. So over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Matthew. I will just go in and share my screen now. I've got some slides to share. Can everyone see my slides there?
Got it, Michelle.
Great, thank you. So yes, thank you very much for inviting me along to speak today. I'm really excited to join you this morning. As Matthew mentioned, I was one of the participants at the recent Digital Preservation Essentials attendee feedback workshops. And I'm just here to give a little bit of feedback on how what I sort of got from those sessions as an attendee. So I'm the Council Archivist as part of the Research and Collection Services team at the Parramatta Heritage and Visitor Information Centre. And so I would like to acknowledge that the City of Parramatta Council acknowledges the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and pays its respects to elders past, present and emerging. The word Parramatta is actually derived from the name given to the area by the traditional custodians, the Parramattagal people, and it means the place where the eels lie. So just a quick bit of background into where I came to the workshops, just to give you a bit of a framework around what I was sort of looking to learn. I've been the Council Archivist at the City of Parramatta for the past 4 years, and prior to that I worked in London. All of my career really I've been pretty much paper-based, analogue sort of archivist, working with old volumes and object files, etc. The City of Parramatta Council Archives is a historic, significant council collection. Our earliest record is from 1846, and again, it's a very analogue collection currently, paper records, film footage, as in actual film and video, maps and plans, ephemera, etc. We also hold a small community archives collection, as well as the official council collection. And in my role, I manage the archival items, I respond to inquiries, I contribute to research, I undertake outreach activities, but probably of most interest here, I coordinate the archives digitisation projects as well. So as I mentioned, currently the council archives is pretty much analogue. The records are transferred observing the 30-year rule. So basically most records sort of pre-90s, late 80s, early 90s that we hold are currently paper-based or at least not digital. And those items are sentenced using the State Archives GA39 instrument. And the archives does receive a handful of contemporary open access records that are transferred every year, and they're things like annual reports and council minutes, etc. So some of these are born digital now, but what we're currently doing, because there's such a small amount of them, is that we print them onto archival paper and store them as an archival sort of a paper record. But just around the corner is Born Digital Council records that will soon be starting to transfer down to the archives. So we know that we need to get on top of that situation. The community archives is slightly different. It currently holds a mix of analogue and digital items. Traditionally, the items were very much things like old volumes from community groups and hard copy photos, etc. But increasingly, the records being transferred are born digital. So obviously digital photos, film footage, and even the local community groups records now are no longer handwritten minute books. They tend to be Word documents or PDF documents, that type of thing. So they're being transferred over now. So we've been digitising for some time, probably about 2012, that sort of time. We started a digitisation project and it's still ongoing. We focused initially on the vital records, so minutes, rate books, etc., and we're now moving through to photographs, moving images, and some of the more outlying sort of collections. There's been very much a focus on digitisation as opposed to digital preservation. So that's a bit of a culture change in the whole organisation, really, to start not just saying, oh, we've got a chunk of money, please go and digitise some records. We're very much now trying to impress the importance of that whole workflow and that whole process that obviously needs support and funding from beginning and ongoing. So currently our systems are not great, I have to admit. We save our preservation copies on shared drives and we have backups on large external drives that are kept in safe locations. And our access copies are also stored on the shared drives. And as I said, we know that's not ideal. And again, our quality control is undertaken by visual checks. So basically I'll go through and do a random sort of check of the different records. I'll check the file sizes, I'll count how many files have returned, etc. But I know that that's not the best practice to be doing. So next year, a focus for us will be to start planning to work with colleagues. The cultural collections officer that I work with, Natalie Casaniti, is currently developing a digitisation policy or revisiting our digitisation policy, and then we're going to move on to developing and implementing a robust digital preservation workflow system. And like everywhere, our council IT is very keen to move things to the cloud and is progressively moving lots of our stored material to the cloud. And this has implications for the records in the archives collections, particularly because we hold all of our historic records on site. We don't deposit anything currently with state archives and records. So they are state archives that we're holding, and there's obviously implications about how and where they're stored for preservation for some hundreds of years hence. So moving on to the actual workshops. I attended the seminars that Matthew mentioned in 2018, and because I was really interested in learning more about the actual practical ideas around how to deliver this workflow we know we need to do. So I've got some photos there from the day that people might recognise if they were there. And I'm a bit of a Han Solo fan, so I was pretty pleased when he popped up. And that was a great day. That was really interesting. And so I was really interested to learn more about digital preservation and as I said, work out how to do our workflow. I was really quite nervous joining the workshops because it's really out of my comfort zone. As I said, my past experience has been really focused on paper-based material, or at least film and hard copy photographs, etc. So yeah, I came to it excited and knowing it's really something that I need to get into, but also feeling quite nervous. But I found joining the sessions were really straightforward. I found downloading some of the tools prior to the workshop, I was a little overwhelmed by that to begin with because I haven't used them before, but the instructions that were given were very clear, and by the time I downloaded them and played around a little bit, I was actually sort of enjoying getting to learn about them. The workshop itself was a great opportunity to connect with community, both people with expertise in this area and people like myself at the beginning of the journey and everywhere in between. It was very professionally moderated and well run workshop, so it ran very smoothly. It was very easy to join in, and there was a great mix of presentations and activities. So there was a little bit of sort of information to begin with, and then we broke into smaller groups, which was very sort of hands-on. And that was really, really great. As I said, it was great to break into smaller groups for the sort of smaller activities to work together. So yeah, it really gave a good idea of where to start and where I could find more information. It was the first time I'd used Padlet, and I found that was fun and really worked well. If anyone hasn't used it, maybe lots of people have, but it's basically like sort of digital post-it notes that you move around. So that was really, really worked well. So the activity on day one I found really, really helpful because basically, as I said, it was like getting a load of post-it notes with a process, parts of a process written on them, and really having to think through where do we slot those in. Lots of terminology, as we said, sort of SIPs and DIPs and OAS and all sorts of things I'm really not that across. So that was a great way to learn the basics. And we also looked at some of the technologies that we would use, things like baguette exit files, and mapped that against which process would be most useful for those. And day two activity was again very practical, looking at the Droid system, which I hadn't used previously. So that was a really great introduction to how to use that system and sort of talk about other technologies that are available. So following on, I was inspired to join the Australasia Preserves group. So I'm now a member of that and receive the emails once a day. So they're really interesting. And I've really got into doing some reading and some further research in the area through that connection. In the new year, we're going to move forward and do the full audit, pull together all our spreadsheets of different digitised and born digital records we have here, there and everywhere, and then meet with colleagues to really start to develop a good workflow. That, because it's council, will need to go as a briefing note to senior managers to approve, and then once that's approved, we will finalise it and implement it. And obviously, hopefully I'll be able to sort of link in with the Australasia Preserves for some support there. That would be really, really valuable. We'll continue to meet with IT, because I think what came across in the workshop was that people really, it's really important to have this really great relationship with IT, that you feel very supported by them and vice versa, and that they understand what you're trying to achieve and why. So we will definitely continue those links going. So at the end of the whole workshop, I sort of still feel a little bit overwhelmed, both by what I have to do and the technologies and terminologies I'm learning. But I really definitely feel I know where to start now, what to read and where to go to get some support. And I'm really, really looking forward to the workshops that Matthew mentioned, getting more into the Bagot and XF, etc., and that sort of really practical way of learning where we're going. I'm particularly interested in the very beginning, like how to conduct a really sound audit to understand what we've got and what file formats we have, etc., and the technologies, which isn't my strong point. So that's something I would really value learning more about. So thank you very much again for inviting me to speak here today. I really appreciate it, and thank you for running the workshops. They were great, and I look forward to joining new ones. And I've just put my contact details there and a link to our website should you be interested in contacting me or learning more. It would be great to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. It was really great to hear about your experience at the workshop. And there's also a lot of tie-ins with some of the feedback I received from other participants as well.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, it was really good. It was really worthwhile and interesting.
Great. All right, if you could stop sharing your screen and I'll jump back on with some results from the survey. Okay, so thanks again, Michelle, and we'll have some further discussions after I go through this bit at the end as well. So as part of the expression of interest for participants to take part in the workshop, they're asked to rate their digital preservation skills and knowledge as part of the EOI, as well as part of the training feedback itself. So this is the result from the expression of interest, where you can see a mix between beginner, intermediate, and some intermediate advanced. So coming across to the training feedback itself, you can see there's a lot more that have shifted into that intermediate space, which is a pretty good result considering that we had only delivered 2 out of the 5 modules so far. So participant satisfaction was high across all areas, with 60% very satisfied and 40% somewhat satisfied with the overall workshop. And the two main technology platforms utilised for online delivery, as Michelle mentioned, were Zoom and Padlet, which participants also indicated high satisfaction with. So Zoom was used to host the training, where the main presentations were conducted similar to how we're doing it now with all participants, but then we utilised the breakout rooms for those smaller group activities. Unfortunately, some participants did not have a camera and/or a microphone, but participated through the chat function, which was useful. So as Michelle mentioned, Padlet is an online board that can be used by participants to collaborate in real time for collecting ideas, brainstorming, and sharing information. So participants can post comments, images, videos, and links on any topic. So we use the Canvas template, and here you can see a read-only overview that was provided to participants with links to documents and resources. So throughout the entire workshop, participants could refer back to this to get links to the material that they needed. Each group had their own individual Padlet link to work on with the group activity of building their own workflow. So participants indicated that the material is relevant to improving their skills and activities performed for their job, and that the content helped them meet the learning outcomes. The majority of respondents considered the difficulty and pace of the workshop were about right, while all were very likely or likely to recommend the workshop to a friend or a colleague. So in noting their confidence to apply what they've learned in their workplace, there was an interesting mix between confident and neither confident or unconfident. So it's going to be interesting to see what results we see after participants have completed the entire 5 modules of the workshop. Participants were asked which delivery method they would prefer for the remaining modules, with 73% of respondents preferring online and 27% face-to-face. So for online delivery, one participant noted that as someone who has a 4-hour commute to attend state library meetings, it's incredibly exhausting having as much time in commute as workshopping. This kind of structure would make it far more likely that I'd be able to attend future workshops. So this is quite relevant to the Australasia Preserves community, with members from across 2 countries and significantly large distances. These selected responses on key takeaways highlight the value of this training. So participants also noted that they're already running Droid scans over their image collections and finding it immensely useful in correcting errors, that the course was a great introduction to the main terminology, concepts, and processes of digital preservation, and that while they prefer face-to-face training, the online version far exceeded their expectations. So overall, the training was successful and provided valuable feedback to improve the content and guide revision of the remaining modules. So critical to the success of this online delivery was the contribution of library staff as instructors and facilitators for group activities. So there was always one presenter with 2 to 3 facilitators available during the training to help with group activities and answer questions in the chat. So there's still a little bit more work to do in updating the material following feedback from participants, as well as trainers and facilitators for these first 2 modules. We will be delivering the remaining modules online for participants of this first trial early next year and expect there'll be more updates to the material following that. So the intention of the working group was to create this material, and the next part falls onto you as a community. So we as a working group will not be delivering this training. We've made this material freely available under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license for others to be able to deliver this training in any context. So what have we actually released? The training material includes administrative resources, which highlights the module pathways, proposed timeline for a 2-day face-to-face workshop, expression of interest template, reflection questions and discussion points. It has participant resources, including software setup guide and workshop files. And then each module contains a training outline, the presentation slides, activity workbook for participants, and also a participant handbook, which contains all of the content from the slides. So that's available on the Australasia Preserves website currently, and we will be updating that soon. So it will be maintained on the Australasia Preserves website going forward. And if you'd like to run this training yourself and have any questions, you can get in touch on the Google group or via the contact form on the website. If you have any feedback on the training material itself, there is a feedback form on the bottom of the webpage. And lastly, if you remix this training material, we would be happy to hear about it and link to it from the webpage. So I just wanted to quickly highlight a couple of points from Michelle's feedback as well as the general participant feedback, in that it was good to see some practical outcomes from participants. So Michelle mentioned strategy there. I can see we have another attendee today that is also looking at their strategy and including digital preservation as part of their digitization strategies. It was also a really good point that Michelle made in terms of talking to IT. So part of the expression of interest, we actually encouraged people to include IT as part of the workshop. So we allowed people to have up to 2 participants from one organization. And we did have at least one IT person there that I was aware of. And it was interesting when you talk about the challenges of installing this software on computers and challenges with IT. This person from IT had trouble installing the software on their computer. But one of the comments that I thought was really interesting was that they mentioned that they'd never really considered the library's data as an asset until this workshop. So overall, I think it was really good. The feedback was great. And as one of the people involved in developing this material, I think the best way to get feedback is to actually run the course itself. So yeah, I do look forward to finalizing this material along with the rest of the working group. And that's it from me. So I guess we're open for discussion now, Jay.
Thanks, Matt. That is an incredible amount of work. You know, Matthew has put in so much to get us to this point, as well as the rest of the working group. We have a whole bunch of time for questions and discussion while everyone's gathering their thoughts. I might just actually share my screen again because these folks did not get quite enough recognition. The Digital Preservation Essentials Working Group that put all of this amazing material together over the course of 2 years. It's been a real labor of love. So along with Matthew and myself, we have Valerie Love, Peter Nish, Jean Melzak, Kerry Garvey, Rachel Trippier, and Lachlan Glanville. It's been a real labor of love, and it's all volunteer, community-based resource development. So I think we're open for discussion and thoughts. What do people think about the materials or anything you've heard here today? We can have questions and discussion in the chat, or feel free to pop your videos on now and unmute if you have a question to ask.
It's Ross Harvey here. I have a question for Matt and the rest of the group, I suppose. I'm very aware that material in this field, particularly technical material, can become outdated pretty quickly. New updates or upgrades for software, or new software superseding what was commonly used, for example. So what, if any, arrangements have you made for upgrading, maintaining, I suppose, this material so that it's currently valid?
It's a good question, Ross, and I guess it's worth noting that the material that's currently on the website was released by the working group in, I think, June or July, if I recall correctly, Jay. And even since then, we did some pretty considerable updates, at least to that first module on concepts and workflows, where the material that's currently on there refers to a reference model that is no longer available online. So that was from the Open Preservation Foundation's website, and they did a website revamp, and that reference model is no longer there. And also new reference models were released by the National Archives of the UK as well in terms of workflow stuff. So we, in terms of releasing this stuff now, are keeping it up to date, but it is a good question going forward. I think for me, given that I'm running this content over the next 12 months, then there's an incentive to keep it up to date there. But I think it will come to a point where the material will be out of date, and it will kind of fall onto the person who's delivering the training to update it. And I guess the intention of the working group and the development of this material wasn't necessarily to maintain it ongoing, but to give you a good footprint to start off with. So if anyone wants to deliver this training, they can see what's there now, and they can build on that and update it as they see fit.
Can I just throw a question?
Pardon?
Can I just make a question?
Yeah.
I'm just interested to know about the delivery side of it, and appreciate, as I think you were saying, Matthew, it'll be up to us to follow through on that ourselves. I'm just thinking, so I'm from Tasmanian Archives, and obviously many of us will be also from small organisations. I was just wondering, as far as, would it be possible that we have some kind of a suggested people, or people who could put up their hand who would say, yes, I would be able to deliver this material online, because just thinking off the top of my head, I don't think we've got anyone local who might be suitable. Just throwing that in, wondering what people think about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess that's where it comes to the community, and whether we do a post on the forum, or if people want to put their hand up now and if they feel comfortable to deliver this training. I guess from my point of view, I could justify my time, my work time, developing this material by delivering this training to New South Wales Public Libraries. So I can't necessarily get away with that from an employer perspective if I'm delivering it to everyone else. So I guess people need to be aware of the resourcing required to deliver this training as well. I
would imagine there would need to be some cost, and that I think that stands to reason, you know, in any training that be presented. But I mean, perhaps there might be people out there who feel they've got the capabilities and who could just put their in, I don't know, in some place to say, look, you know, we'd be willing and able, and then it'd be up to them to negotiate with the organisation to see if that can be arranged.
Yep, definitely. And I will say that myself and I'm sure other members of the working group would be willing to answer any questions people might have if they do want to deliver and want any feedback from what we've done so far as well.
Thanks, Matthew.
Anyone else like to jump in, whether in the chat or feel free to unmute your microphone?
Can I beg the, what's the word? Can I beg the indulgence of the group again?
Yes, you
Is that a, yes, thank you. I believe there are other members of the working group, the subgroup. Excuse me, lost my words and thoughts. Let me start again. I think there are other members of the education development work group here present today: Lizzie, Lisa, Jean, and Sophie. I'm wondering if you have anything to contribute to what I said. In particular, I'm interested in whether you've come across examples of whether the guidelines being used or not. So over to you.
It's Lizzie here. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a bad internet connection here. So I haven't really heard of the guidelines being used. I guess from our perspective, many of you will maybe aware that our MIT program are closing and of the Masters of Information Management, and so we're in a teach out period for that, but which is quite a negative thing to start off with saying. But the positive side of that is, though, that digital curation preservation has been picked up as a thing that will hopefully be transformed and taken forward into other things and integrated into other parts of programs. So hopefully we might get a wider appeal for that kind of stuff, but not perhaps in the form that we envisaged it originally. So I'd be hoping to continue the conversation with everybody about the best way of doing that.
Hi, this is Lisa. I can't tell if I can be seen. Hopefully you can see me. Again, the same as Lizzie, I haven't really used the guidelines or haven't seen where they've been used. I'm pretty keen to, we do a preservation unit that is really heavily digital preservation. And so I've kind of incorporated some of the things that I learned as part of the education group into that. I'm kind of just as flagging sort of the future kind of stuff, because we did have a brief discussion about that. And Ross already highlighted that potentially there is, things go out of date, and how we might keep it up to date is really of interest to me. And the DPC has already got a survey out about, the kinds of training and sort of taking a snapshot. So how we would include all of that and how we continue to develop it over time. So not making sure that it is reviewed and worked on, and that kind of thing is, and communicated to people. So not just people taking it up if they need to, but how we can get it out to people as a package. I know it's on DPC, but maybe Jay can talk and Matt can talk a little bit about that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Lizzie. I'll just pause a moment in case, Jean, I know you're here, if you had anything to say as well, to give you the chance. Sophie, I see you're here too. but putting you on the spot, I'll let you gather your thoughts there. Alrighty, I think that's kind of the end of our questions. Matt, would you like to do any closing comments or thoughts?
I guess just to highlight that if anyone is interested in delivering this training, post on the forum or use the contact form on the Australasia Preserves website and get in touch, and we're happy to support that. And yeah, we will, the content on the website will be updated once we've finalized the review of the material, and we'll notify everyone via the forum and the usual Twitter channels as well once that's been done.
Thank you, Matt. Please join me, everyone, in virtual applause for our speakers today. Ross, Michelle, Matthew, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. That's it, folks. I am going to go straight to our wrap up. This is our last meetup for the year, as I've mentioned. We'll be back in February, which is the month that we traditionally celebrate the birthday of Australasia Preserves. So February 2021 will be actually the third birthday of this community of practice. So although things will be a little quiet for the next few months, do get in touch if you want to run a session or you want to organize, you know, even an ad hoc meetup of any kind. We're happy to help facilitate that. Community is all about people. So I'm so pleased to share this slide of faces here. These are our 2020 Australasia Preserves co-organisers group. Rachel Trappier, Leanne Raymond, Ali Hayes-Brady, Andrea Goethals, Matthew Burgess, and Dave Allen. This group of people helps organise meetups, they write blog posts, they keep the online forum going, they set up and they maintain the website and all of the resources that this community has developed and shared. There is lots of unseen volunteer labour that goes into maintaining such a vibrant community, and these fine people here have invested their spare time and energy this year to keep the community the vibrant and useful resource that it is. If you are interested in taking on a more active role in the community, get in touch. Again, we would love fresh voices and ideas contributing to this very diverse and growing community of practice. So also a big thank you to everybody who comes along to these meetups. Thank you everybody here today. Thank you those who put their hand up and ask questions on the forum, those who answer questions on the forum, sharing their knowledge and expertise so generously. It's been a really odd but fantastic year to have this community to support our work. So thank you all. That's it for today, folks. So if we don't see you before, see you all next year.